Hi, welcome back to Adventure Capital. In this episode, we talk with Bill Ottman, founder and CEO of Minds. Minds is an open source, decentralized social network where users can earn crypto tokens for their contribution to the network. Frustrated by the filters and algorithms that limit organic reach on many social media platforms like Facebook, Bill wanted to create a new social media model engineered for internet freedom and user control. Bill founded this gathering of the minds on the pillars of privacy, transparency, and free expression, and quickly grew to a community of over 200,000 monthly active users. Mind raised $1 million from around 1,500 investors on WeFunder in June of 2017 in just 19 days. Keep listening to learn more about Minds, how they ran one of the fastest campaigns in WeFunder history, and how they've continued to grow since.
Hey, Bill. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And maybe we could start by you just telling us a little bit about Minds, the company you're building.
Yeah, Minds is an open source social network, sort of powered by the community and crypto and open source software. And we had an awesome experience on WeFunder. It was we did a small seed round before WeFunder, but basically in 2017, we raised just, over $1 million from 1,500 members of our network. We're basically like an alternative to Facebook and Twitter and YouTube that is transparent, privacy focused, more community driven, trying to respect people's digital rights and also help creators get rewarded and earn money for what they do online. One main thing is all of our code is totally free and open source, so anyone can inspect our algorithms. They can, see if there's surveillance happening, which there isn't, but theoretically you need that right in order to know an app isn't spying on you. Mm-hmm. So all totally transparent in that sense. Also, so everything is on GitLab at gitlab.com/minds. All our code, all our policies are being peer reviewed by the community all the time and changing. Beyond that, we have this reward system where you earn tokens, and the Minds token is an Ethereum-based token. You earn them for your contributions to the network every day, from receiving engagement to making referrals and a number of other actions you can do. And then one token is pegged to 1,000 impressions, so you can redeem the tokens that you earn for more exposure on the network. And you can also tip creators with them. You can get premium features and more storage and stuff like that. So that was in response to how on Facebook you're only reaching like 5%, less than 5% of your own followers and friends when you post. It is a total joke at this point. I mean, they completely damage the one thing that people used it for, which was, you post and people see it. And now the algorithms, there's thousands of variables that are deciding what Facebook thinks you want to see and what your friends want to see. So, that's just the opposite of, a good ethical model. I just think that and now the other networks are starting to bring in the algorithms, Instagram, but owned by Facebook, so obvious that would happen. But it gets. And sorry, I'll end rant, but
no, this is great stuff, man. This is the place we want to be dwelling on. So love it. Keep going. Keep ranting.
They know that teenagers get depression from their likes, and they still push the button to limit the reach more because they think that their AI knows what you're going to click on more than you do. And, maybe for some sort of alternative feed, fine. Like, I'll take the AI algorithms. But for the default newsfeed, our philosophy is it always has to be totally chronological. And so you're always having that unfiltered news stream that you subscribe to. If you don't like what someone does, you can change your settings and whatnot. But you should always have that main access. And that, because brands, this hit the whole media industry.
So let me dig on that, because that's obviously super controversial, right? The kind of negative societal impact of social media platforms that I think there's kind of growing body of evidence around. So I would I would be concerned, I guess, that with Minds, you're not able to fix that. Can you talk about, like, you kind of touched on it there a little bit in terms of like the audience that a post is going to be visible to, but can you dig into that a little bit? Like, why is it the case that, for Facebook today, it's kind of leading to anxiety and stress among teenagers, but for Minds that you would kind of mitigate that problem?
Right. Well, there's two layers of why people are getting depressed. One is just with technology in general. We're all becoming addicted to our devices and to different apps. So that's like the higher level problem, which we're actually trying to solve. We're also doing live gatherings and meetup kind of. We're integrating gatherings and events into our product
Which
live.
Facebook are trying to do too, I think, right? Like Mark Zuckerberg wrote that long blog post about community, I think a few years ago, to say first decade of Facebook was about quantity and growth and metrics, and the second decade is about kind of quality of engagement and community. So at least he professes to be trying to move Facebook more in that direction.
Yeah. So
I sense a bit of skepticism.
Yeah, because
in
look,
your tone
Facebook isn't sitting there like, oh my gosh. I mean, well, look, maybe they obviously don't want people committing suicide from being, on social media. They don't want that. Okay. I would never accuse them of that. And I do think that they probably have some good tools for dealing with it. But you have to separate the depression that you get from knowing that you're being restricted and knowing or just seeing your likes drop. That's because you had an audience and then your audience was taken away from you. So that's one way to get depression. Another is to just be addicted in general, which isn't cool. And we all have to do better about educating ourselves how to not be addicted to tech. It's hard. We can help that through education and live events and, having more ethical technology and being transparent and not spying on people. But there does come a point where it's just a lifestyle thing that people need to figure out. But so it's sort of double depression on the sites that are changing the algorithms, because there's the general tech depression, and then there's the depression from knowing that you're being you're getting less of an audience.
Well, what do you think about Instagram's decision recently? I think they're testing right now in certain countries, like removing the number of likes from posts. You probably know more about that than I do, but is that a positive for you, do you think? Or
I think that is a Band-Aid on something that's a much deeper problem. And they're not taking away your like, so you're still gonna see it, but people aren't gonna see yours. But then they're all just gonna start screenshotting it. They're going to screenshot it. The information's going to get out there. I don't think people care. People can accept that, okay, there's people who get, there's celebrities and then there's not celebrities. I think that as long as they know what the deal is, I'm going to come in, I'm going to build up a following. And if I can do that, I should be able to reach those people. I think that's what people want. But Facebook and others are changing the game halfway through the game. They said, hey, come on, reach all your followers. People spend millions of dollars building up audiences on Facebook. Oh, no, actually, sorry, you can't reach those people anymore. That feels like a betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, because we know from experience, we built pages on Facebook with millions of followers and watched, day after day, the reach drop, and that whole investment of time and energy become largely wasted. When I think the social contract, we really have to have honest upfront contracts when we're signing up for these companies. It shouldn't, like, all these shady terms about surveillance and data and reach or whatever it is. It's just, there sort of needs to be a new way of doing things. And there's a wave of new apps with like Web3 and decentralization and blockchain and crypto, where there are apps that want to protect your freedom. And I think that those are going to become more competitive over time, almost like as a inevitability. I think people would just prefer more control.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like with the kind of almost like societal level kind of backlash against Facebook, I mean, it seems like just their brand is kind of going through a lot of difficulties right now. But are kind of you seeing a lot of enthusiasm for the network you're building and the kind of more open sourced approach that you're taking to building a social media network? I imagine like this is very kind of apt timing for you to be launching Minds and growing.
Yeah,
Minds.
we have, I mean, more users than we've ever had, and we're growing really naturally. We're not even really spending money on marketing much yet. We're still, because we'll make that push once the app is fully ready. But it's just natural growth right now. And Facebook hides behind Instagram. Most people don't even know that Facebook owns Instagram and WhatsApp. And so Instagram is the only thing really saving Facebook right now. And the founders of Instagram left because they were upset with what Facebook was doing. Same with the founder of WhatsApp, Brian Acton, and then he went and gave $50 million to the Signal Foundation for open source encrypted messaging. So all the founders are running for the hills of all of the companies that they bought, and it's sort of they need deep structural changes in how they do business in order for them to be long-term viable. I think in the community-owned open source, I think that's just
it's
where
a
a lot of
alternative.
Yeah. And it's like Wikipedia. Look at Wikipedia is a top 10 network in the world, totally open source, powered by the people to a point. I think there's some maybe issues with some of the admin hierarchies, but it's still a cool process and experiment, and it's blown up. Wikipedia, who doesn't love Wikipedia? And
although they are, they're always just to kind of play devil's advocate, they are always kind of messaging you, hey, we need donations to keep Wikipedia open. One question I wanted to ask you, going back to something we said earlier, so I was challenging you on, if Facebook has these kind of potentially negative social impacts on kind of depression and anxiety, how are you guys going to fix it? But the other question is, Facebook is making these decisions around who is seeing posts and impressions and engagement because of monetization and because of revenue, right? How are you going to take a different tack, because you're a for-profit company, right? You're also kind of incentivized to grow your revenue and profit. Like, there's certainly a very strong financial incentive for you to kind of make similar decisions. So what's the kind of check? How are you going to kind of do better kind of in the long term when it comes to some of these trade-offs?
For sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, basically, we think that if we can help creators earn revenue, then if we become the best place to earn revenue online, then we're going to make money. You don't need to spy on people and use algorithms and take away their reach in order to increase your revenue. It's one way to increase your revenue, but it's just not a way that we're willing to, because we think there's certain core features that just need to stay intact. And but additionally with subscriptions, Facebook could do a subscription model and not spy on you and not take away your reach. But why don't they? There's so many other options, and I just don't understand why they're so stubborn to like keep it as this quote unquote free service, which is really not free at all. It is, totally extractive and, manipulates you in ways that you can't even possibly understand because we can't see what the code is doing. So, long-term revenue wise, they're shooting themselves. They are destroying their viability and trust with the public. And so as soon as there's some competition out there for them tech wise, which, give us some time and we will get there. There's not going to be, that's a much easier decision for a regular user to make. Like, oh, wait, do I go on Facebook? They don't give me anything. They actually take away my reach and spy on me. Or do I go to this one that I can actually start making money as soon as I sign up, no matter how big of an audience I have? And I have transparency, and I can even become involved in how the product changes. And I compare it to like organic food. Before organic food came out around, that whole movement, labeled non-GMO, no one really knew the difference. But then when there was a decision you can make in the market, organic or conventional, the organic movement is exploding. And it's really, people are doing that for ethical reasons. they, and they want it to be healthier. And, I think there actually have been some cool essays written about the relationships between, food transparency and software.
Bill, I'm really curious to hear how you got into this. How did you start Minds? What was the kind of precursor to this this network that you've created?
We actually started off doing live events for like the first few. I mean, before it was sort of a totally different. It was called Gathering of the Minds, and I went to University of Vermont, and we would do these forums / festivals at in City Hall Park and at
Bill,
the
you're
university.
into
And
puns, right? Like Gathering of the Minds. We were looking at the Bill of Rights on your website. Are you like really into puns? What did you even like? Was the Bill of Rights deliberate?
no,
In my that's what I sometimes call you, the Bill of Rights.
nice.
Okay,
All right.
sorry.
Well, it's an
Back to
unintended.
Vermont.
So yeah, unintended. But so we were doing these events. It was a platform for sort of collaboration and discourse, really. And we're still very much involved in that. I mean, a lot of our policy with, being First Amendment based is really important because, we've brought together a lot of peer-reviewed research that shows that censorship can actually increase extremism and violence and polarization, and that this is a lot of the drama going on. I actually attended the White House Social Media Summit recently, and this topic came up. Well, this was the focus topic actually of how big networks may or may not be censoring for politically biased reasons. And
That's an interesting question, right? Because like you must have an algorithm as well, right? Like everything has an algorithm, and so right, like
right,
and your
but if
algorithm
you
may be
have
open
if you
source, but
right, but what our policy says that our algorithms will, certainly not be politically biased, and our algorithms in AI would also never ban or take down content before it's been reviewed by a human. So we can have bots help us. Like we can, all of those can be auxiliary tools that then feed into, so because all of this demonetization that's happening on YouTube with for hate speech. I mean, Ford Fisher, who's a prominent journalist, he's on Minds. He got demonetized on YouTube because he went and covered a KKK rally. He's not conservative at all. He's the opposite of he's liberal. He's I don't even know if I'm not going to say what he's definitely not far right. So just the algorithm is not smart enough to understand nuance and context. So lots of people from the left are getting affected by censorship, and this is why people like Noam Chomsky and the EFF and a lot of these internet rights organizations are largely progressive, and so it's really just this faction that is, I guess, maybe growing in power that thinks that censoring speech is actually a good solution, because it's, even if you wanted to diminish hate speech, you don't do it by censoring that. Look at the research. This is why people like Daryl Davis, who is a black man who befriended hundreds of members of the KKK, got them all to leave. He did a TED talk. This is you de-radicalize people through open discourse, not by censoring them into silence. That's certainly not how trolls on the internet operate. And there's a lot of research on troll psychology as well. So all of those things together sort of, I think that one of the big networks needs to have a totally drastic transformation and existential moment, or I don't know how they're going to be able to survive. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be harder to get Google and Facebook obviously to the position of MySpace because they're so integral to everyone's lives. But so it's going to take a lot longer, and I don't think they'll ever be able to become MySpace, like that severe of a disaster. But I don't know. It just seems like the alternatives are going to keep getting better, and then I don't know why people would keep giving those companies their energy.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating discussion. I think one that will, present very vexing challenges for us as a society to grapple with over the coming decades. Do you find yourself, because obviously there's been a lot of kind of pushback from conservatives that big social media platforms have a liberal spin. Do you find that Minds is attracting kind of relatively conservative users or libertarian users who kind of are kind of reacting against Facebooks and Googles and YouTube,
I mean,
Instagram?
some, but I really don't notice a political, overly political vibe. I mean, we have our original growth was largely liberal, progressive users and activists, actually.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, rational progressives and libertarians agree on almost everything. That's why Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich were such good friends, because they are principled thinkers. And so we sort of see that on Minds. I mean, Tim Pool, who's he's one of our biggest channels. He's a big journalist on YouTube, and he's center left, and I don't know. I've always been outside of the political spectrum, sort of. I just can't really I can't make myself associate with left or the right. It seems like an odd thing to do to just sort of get rid of a whole mode of thought. But yeah, I think that there is sort of undeniably something happening in Silicon Valley with this censorship and, slight bias. It gets cured with transparency, and there's a bill going through, not going through, it's proposed now by let's see, it is Senator Hawley's bill called the Ending Support for Internet Censorship Act, which would require major sites to be unbiased in content moderation, and just be politically neutral. So some of the footage that you see of the executives of the big companies, how they're targeting different specific individuals. I mean, there's definitely some problems. So, we rolled out a whole jury system for appeals, basically, so that we're not the ones doing the appeal. Because, the Santa Clara principles say that you need an independent authority doing appeals. And so what happens now, if someone disagrees with a decision that we made, it gets appealed to a randomized group of 12 active users, and they can either participate or not. And then that jury votes on, maybe something needs to be tagged as NSFW, or maybe something unrightly got tagged NSFW, or whatever type of complaint. And it's working. It's sort of decentralizing governance, and people like it, because as we grow, we have to hire more moderators. Moderators are subject to bias. So the jury is mandated to vote within our terms, which are First Amendment based and, supposed to be unbiased. So you're not just going into the jury voting on your own opinion about something. It's like, does this post contain overly graphic, violent image of the Iraq War? Does it need a blur on it? That is sort of what we're trying to dumb it down to be very simple and matter of fact, but it's not easy. There's all kinds of edge cases, and it is, it's definitely sometimes controversial, but it's a minority of the users and content on our site who, are even dealing with explicit content at all. And I mean, what was shocking to me, Jack Dorsey went on Rogan, and this was right before I went on, and said that they allow pornography on Twitter openly. And I was like, oh, that's odd. We actually got taken down from the App Store, or no, Google Play, for 6 months because of it wasn't even a nude image. It was just someone in a bikini, and but it was marked as explicit. So that I then appealed that to Play 6 months later again with the rebuttal that, well, why is Twitter allowed on Google Play? They have sexual content. Why aren't you kicking them off? And their CEO's openly admitting that it's perfectly fine to be there, even not even so much just allowing it. The guy is saying, oh yeah, this is, it's fine. So, that puts Google and Apple in a weird position, and they're being inconsistent with their practices. And so we won that appeal, which was really important. But we also made a version of the app that is just direct from us, because you can't trust these. The app stores are pretty much monopolies, and it's it's just too bad. And I think people make the argument too emotional. It's like, none of us like hate speech or violence or any of that kind of stuff. No one likes that. But I think that you don't go around telling Google to take it out of their search results, and you don't. The phone company doesn't play politics, and it's a little bit different than the phone company, but it's so much easier for everyone to accept, okay, this is the internet. It's a crazy place. We're going to, obviously take down illegal content, but beyond that, you kind of have to let it be, because otherwise you get trapped in this sort of gray area of subjectivity and bias and, inconsistency with all the little nuances of every little, one word could be coming from a comedic context. It could be meaning the opposite of what the word is saying. It's sarcasm, there's irony, there's all kinds of different effects that AI has decades before it's really going to be able to understand. And so I think we can use these algorithms to our advantage. Like, yes, we have them, but we don't filter the news feed, and we don't auto ban things before having humans get involved.
Yeah, I think the jury approach that you guys have taken is super interesting. And just to transition a little bit, you raised over $1 million on WeFunder from over 1,500 investors in June 2017 in 19 days. So because you were able to raise so fast, presumably some of those people were your users and people who really, really support what you're doing with Minds and really want to be involved in this decentralized social network. I'm curious how you found WeFunder, and how did you decide that it was the right platform for you to raise capital?
Let's see. I always wanted to be community owned. I mean, we started in 2011, 2012, and then we didn't launch our first apps until like 2015. And then, the Jobs Act hadn't even gone through back then. So, I was tracking this up until it went into action, and then platform. I even wanted to maybe become a portal for investor, but then, I think it makes more sense because there's limitations that you run into there as well. But you guys just were the top one and got in touch. I became really good friends with Dylan. Do you guys know Dylan?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And
Very well.
Dylan is the man, and we just had a great time working with him. And then it just took off, and we got a few majors, and the community got involved, and now everyone's converted to preferred stock from the Series A that we did. And it was just a really, really good experience. And I'm, want to having our investors be our users. I mean, that is the best thing that you could have, because then they have, just general interest in the product, and so when your investors can, know that they're incentivized to be there, and that, they just have a stake, they have a voice in the community. So And that's one of the biggest issues with the big networks as well, that there's no community voice. There's no voting on what happens. It's just, pretty much they're watching what everyone's doing and looking at the analytics, but so you're sort of telling them where to develop their project, like without them even telling that you're doing it, because they're just tracking where your mouse is and where you click.
It's awesome,
and
by the way, that
how long you're
those
on.
investors in your WeFunder campaign, they invested through a safe note future equity contract with you, and when you raised your Series A, they converted. That's awesome. How much did you raise in the Series A, and who was that from?
That was for $6 million from Medici Ventures, which is a blockchain focused fund.
Very cool. And like as Katie mentioned, you raised very quickly on WeFunder, raised over $1 million in 19 days. Was that literally just like you promoted it on social to your users and watched them roll in? Like, did people come from the WeFunder network? Like, how did you execute on the campaign? Because obviously everyone, if there's a founder that's listening running a WeFunder campaign, they would love to emulate your success. Obviously, you got to have a great product and terms that are compelling to investors. But like, how practically did you execute on the campaign?
You have to have the community, and I think you need tens of thousands of people at least to be able to know that they can participate right away and have like good contact with them. So having a big YouTube channel, or having, if you have a social network or that, but having them be a user in your product already is, that was our greatest sort of strong point.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the WeFunder investors did participate. I don't remember what the breakdown was. I think maybe it was like 20%, something like that, maybe 25% from WeFunder. I don't remember that exact data, but definitely was some. And I guess we had a working product.
Yeah, you had the audience.
And so you need, whether it's your product or someone that that just has huge reach and their community is like a perfect fit for you, you want to partner with them, because you need access to a lot of people. And so becoming the community owned XYZ and then making a social network for that. Mm-hmm. I tend to think that more brands could benefit from having social networks as opposed to just a regular website. I mean, WeFunder is sort of a social network in itself. Even in its function, you can post out, you can follow people. So you guys
absolutely.
have been really smart.
We're seeing more and more of those connections happening where, an investor in this one brewery is jumping over to invest in this brewery, or an investor who lives in, Pennsylvania is investing in a bunch of companies in Pennsylvania, or this investor is reaching out to that founder because they can add value and kind of support them, outside of fundraising. So that's definitely the vision for us. That you can call it a social network. We use the word community a lot, but that's definitely part of our long-term vision.
I was just stunned when it was happening. Mm-hmm. Like, we got the majors. You need that in the pot to launch. I would say,
when you say majors,
not launch.
Can you just like, what do you mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so we,
like large investors you're talking about.
Yeah, large investors. Like, we did $100K minimum for majors, and they got pro rata and voting rights actually in that round.
Got it. And so you said, okay, if you invest $100K, then you get pro rata and voting rights. If you invest less than that, then you get the standard kind of, you don't get pro rata rights, you don't get voting rights.
You can still get the early bird discount, but you can't get the different rights. And so we had like 3 major investors in when we put it public, which I think having two or three.
That's a great way to start the campaign, right? Because then it just adds so much credibility and social proof when you have big check investors that have already, they know you, they've done deep due diligence. If they have 300K on the campaign right from the get-go, it really does kind of make everything else go much more smoothly and quickly.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's a key recommendation to anyone considering one. Like, do the work, wait a little bit longer, find that initial major investor. Maybe you do 50K
Yeah.
minimum for major, 25 or whatever you want to do. But those two things, having the community plus the majors in already, I think those are the two, formulaic things which I think are sort of crucial.
And so that's a great piece of advice for anyone thinking about running a WeFunder campaign. Sure, you got to engage the crowd. You mentioned about the tens of thousands of people in the audience earlier and going to them. But also, like if you can bring in some big check investors, 50K, 25K, I would even say, 10K, 5K. If you can bring in some of those guys early in the campaign, then it really gets things off on the right foot. So that's a great piece of advice for someone running a WeFunder campaign. And then something we also like to ask every founder that we have on is a more general piece of advice, either for a founder kind of in the broadest sense, or someone looking at starting a social media platform or a media company in 2019. Kind of general entrepreneurial advice from Bill Ottman.
I think that you need to tap into some sort of human nature. I think that you want human nature in your product. So, how we've been approaching that is, people have a natural desire to be heard. Why we reward people with, essentially ears and eyes, and we give away reach. One token is 1,000 views. That's sort of tapping into a human nerve. Also just a desire for more control with the privacy and the transparency and ownership and that type of thing. So the community ownership as a funding model is already putting you in a league above your competitors. Obviously, food co-ops are hugely popular and successful, and they could be on a larger scale. So, yeah, and then just rewarding people, and that's it. Human nature.
That's a great note to end on. So human nature, and obviously, as we discussed earlier, I feel like it's not just that human kind of desire that you've tapped into, but also in terms of timing, like absolutely perfect to be just kind of building minds as some of these deep kind of existential questions around conventional social media platforms are arriving. Bill, this has been such a fascinating. Go ahead.
If I could just ask one last question, sort of what we were just saying with different, community-owned market, community-owned grocery store, social network, electric company, whatever it is. It would be interesting to look at all of the companies that WeFunder has helped fund and sort of categorize them in like, okay, these are the pillars of, a city or a society. And so if you had the tech, you have the social network, you have the production company, you guys have I know you have all different companies that you've done. It would be cool to see which of those categories you filled and where the gaps are, because wherever the gaps are, where there isn't community owned companies, that is the best company to community fund because it doesn't exist yet. So there's going to be more of a social need for it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that gives Katie and myself some homework in terms of companies to reach out to.
Those spaces.
Bill, thanks so much. This has been a really, really fascinating conversation. Really enjoyed the discussion, and we'll be seeing you around soon, no doubt.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Adventure Capital is brought to you by your fundraising team here at WeFunder, which consists of Johnny Price, Katie Powers, and myself, Oliver Foyahan. We'll be sharing the adventures of one of our WeFunder founders every other week. If you have any comments, ideas, suggestions, or would just like to find out more about WeFunder or our founders, don't hesitate to contact us at hello@wefunder.com. We'll see you next time.